we often do, Ginny, is we start talking and then we forget to introduce the person. So we're going to
Yeah.
start by introducing you,
Okay.
and you can introduce yourself.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I'm Ginny Ehelebe,
Yeah.
and great to be here. No, Carmen from long time work at the agency.
30 years now.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
just about 30 years. And we're in Texas together. They come once a year from escaping gloomy Portland, Oregon, or the Pacific Northwest. And Ginny is an economist. And I thought I would ask you, Ginny, what got you interested in the dismal science?
Actually, it was just a great professor at college,
Where was that?
Carleton in Minnesota. And I've always thought numbers are our friends. So, having something that was a little quantitative was nice, but the mix of kind of abstract ideas, but you can apply it to the real world and, get kind of concrete.
Yes.
Great.
Right. And, when I knew Ginny, plot reveal, Ginny and I worked at the CIA together. Yes, right?
Yes.
Yes. And I don't think either of us are typically what people think of as people who work at CIA. No?
No.
I would say no.
What did you say?
I would say no.
No.
I would say no. But I have a
No.
question. I have a
Yes,
question for
yes.
Ginny before yeah. So when you say you're an economist, sometimes I sort of parse economists into those that are sort of behavioral economists, like Daniel Kahneman, and those who are more number crunch trend detection economists. And I'm curious where you were.
I'm probably more towards the latter than the former. But I have to say that one of my first managers actually told me I couldn't call myself an economist because in the government you had to have at least an MA in
Or
economics.
MS? Is it an MS in economics or is it an MA?
Usually it's an MA. In the private sector, of course, PhD. And I never made that.
Yes, yes,
but still, so I just call myself a political economist, but with lots of numbers thrown in.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things we want, well, the primary thing we want to talk about today with Ginny is late stage capitalism, because well, what is late stage capitalism?
Well, as I understand it, and I'm not,
You're not an economist.
I'm not an economist, not steeped in Marx and the like, but it's, the belief that capitalism will kind of burn out because it will make the rich so rich and the poor so poor. It'll just kind of exhaust itself.
Isn't that what's happening?
Well,
I mean, the rich are getting richer. There's no doubt about that. And I think the poor are feeling poorer.
But
right, well, it doesn't have to be a continuum. I mean, does it have to be linear? Like, it seems to me late stage capitalism could be a marker. Ginny, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like it could be a marker for a time or an set of experiences. It doesn't have to keep going. It doesn't have to be the extinguishing of capitalism. It could be corrected and move in the other direction. Am I wrong?
It could. And indeed, there have been so many variants of capitalism, throughout the time when people kind of consider the capitalist stage, the Industrial Revolution, that it is an evolving, dynamic thing. I think neoliberal capitalism that everybody thought was so important to, the world's prosperity in the 70s and such, and that, that led to the circumstances that you had the fall of the Berlin Wall. Everybody thought capitalism, it was this triumphal, we found the magic formula. And I think at this point, people don't feel the formula from then was all that magic. I mean, there are always distortions in economies, and we touched on the inequality one. Let me step back just a second and say the poor aren't getting poorer in absolute terms.
True.
But because the wealthy are getting so much wealthier, that gap is, I think serves to,
Well, the gap is growing, right? Is
Well-
that true that the size of the gap between the very rich and the poor is bigger than it's ever been, or is that a misconception?
well, I have been playing around with some new numbers from this, data source I just discovered called real-time inequality.
Oh,
And when you look at the numbers, it depends on, how you define rich. If you look at like the top 10% of the wealthy, in this country, and you look since the mid-70s, actually their wealth compared to average wealth has started to decline.
oh, okay.
Now, when you get above that level, the trend is, for the 1%ers, their share or their wealth relative to the average wealth has gone up. And when you get to the 0.1%, it's obscene. It really is just ridiculous amounts of money. But one of the things that I'm still trying to wrap my head around is the inequality within the wealthy class. I think that's growing much more than, okay.
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
So wait,
Well-
like the top 9% are like the new poor? Are you?
Well, no,
What's
but okay, let me tell you about this one YouTube video I watched on Adam Tooze, who's a wonderful economic historian, and he was taking a look back at the 2008 financial crisis. And he was doing it at a Paris university that focuses on inequality. And I mean, his main point was it was a banking crisis, not an trade-related crisis or a inequality crisis per se. But he went on to talk about one of the really ugly dynamics that made the banking portion sort of worse than, well, it magnified it, which is the competition between the lowly paid investment bankers who are in the more regulated section.
Aw.
But in truth is they kind of top out at 1 to 2 million a year. And then the hedge fund types who can
gotta
go,
fight for them.
who can, make 200 times that
Yeah, there's
amount.
no
Because it's
boundary.
an unregulated,
Is it?
if they take big risks, and they're, this kind of competition and the greed and, the lowly investment bankers hoping to, start getting more money and therefore seeing how far they can play
Oh, so they start playing fast and loose
as fast and loose
as they
so-
can to keep up with
Right,
the
to
hedge
generate-
fund managers.
yeah.
That's going to be a compelling
Well, but-
movie someday
But so,
about
Yeah,
the
it'll be another
investment
Wolf of
bankers
Wall Street.
against the hedge fund.
but what his point was, the inequality within, between the hedge fund guys and the investment bank guys is the same amount as between the, the rich.
Oh, okay. So
There's,
Wow.
they feel as
Wow.
bad.
right,
So how bad you feel economically depends upon what ceiling you're looking at.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how addicted you are
Yeah.
to greed,
So-
right? I mean, how much of this is related to an addiction disorder?
Just plain greed, yes. And the question is, how well can our political system start to correct for those things, or can other things correct for it? I mean, I think
Well, like Bitcoin,
demographic.
there's a new Bitcoin announcement. Sorry.
Yes.
Alex.
I'm psyched because I own
Bitcoin
Bitcoin.
Yeah, there's a new announcement. Could that help correct, like the folks who are playing in the investment banker space and what's,
I don't know.
could that
Yeah.
help correct their impoverished $1 million annual salaries?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, you have to be more pessimistic on the wealth side of the equation than the income, but demographics, I mean, should help improve the returns to the average laborer, and we've seen.
Because there will be from now until probably forever, unless we come up with, droids or whatever, we're
Yeah.
gonna have a real labor shortage in the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah, so there are correcting forces, whether we can ever bring ourselves to deal with some of the tax and other things that have led to the wealth inequality. I'm a little bit more agnostic on that. I mean, there are also huge distortions, or, that probably is not the right word, but coming from the globalization and trade. And that's another thing that it's a little unclear how we get get a uniform set of rules that everybody plays by, that, because I think that's needed.
Yeah. So what would a collapse of capitalism look like? I mean, like, will my Star Wars collection still be valuable? I mean,
But to you, it will be valuable.
That's the great thing about capitalism. It doesn't affect personal meaning.
I don't know what it would look like. I mean, in economics, we know what hunter-gatherer societies look like, and agrarian feudal societies. I mean, I don't think we'd be tossed all the way back to feudal, but if, trust really breaks down in a system, do people, if the banking system truly imploded, I don't know what we do. We're a monetary based capitalism, kind of relies on that as a medium of exchange. And
what does implosion mean? What does that mean to you? Like, does that mean that all the accounts go poof?
well, maybe not poof, but people start having a hard time figuring out, asset values just collapse.
Yes. Well, is that happening in China right now?
They're trying very hard to make it not happen. I mean, we've seen asset price declines. I mean, economies can cope with asset price declines. It's if they start spiraling out of control that, I mean, we survived the Great Depression, capitalism survived, but with changes. There had to be, a New Deal to make it viable, and to not make people decide they wanted to switch. So I'm not quite sure. I mean, I will give lots of thought to the question of what an implosion looks like and whatever, but I guess I figure, the odds of a Cascadia subduction zone disaster are greater right
That's
now
the big earthquake in the Pacific Northwest.
than capitalism imploding, but capitalism is going to change. And
one thing I always
Well,
thought.
yeah.
Go ahead, Julia.
Oh, I just wanted to get to like some scenario mapping, maybe like 3 scenarios that you think about, like with your analyst hat, like if capitalism changes, in what direction, if we have like a massive EMP and no one knows how much money is in their account or could prove that or something, or that things continue along the trajectory that they are, like what does that look like culturally? So that was my question, but Carmen, you were having a thing.
Now of course I have forgotten my question, but I think, yeah, the cultural is a good point, because my
Yeah.
question was, well, how do you think the state of politics in the world, or in America, whatever unit of measurement you want to use, relates to and interplays with all this sort of economic dynamism, really, that exists, because all this new stuff, and people can make money in all these different ways. That is, I mean, you mentioned the New Deal. Would we be better off if we had the capacity, if any government had the capacity to do that kind of thing? Because it seems like government has lost the capacity to do big things to regulate the economy.
I agree with you. I think right now, I mean, I don't know how long this period will last, but there doesn't seem to be the basis for any, significant change in, the tax structure or, the regulatory structure governing, just how much speculation there can be. Just at a national level, there's not that, let alone at an international
Mhm.
level, what sort of trade rules or currency rules there could be or should be. And so, I mean, I guess I just see this weird kind of sourness kind of just taking over, the sense that
Hmm.
there's not, that we don't agree on a way forward. For a while, I mean, people honestly believed capitalism was a good thing. Now I think they're kind of like, well, it's a thing, but it's
Yeah.
so but nobody has a good alternative, because what is I mean, I can't think of one. It would take a lot of creativity.
Well, you know what my answer is?
Anarchism.
Anarchism.
Yes. But wait, you said something really key about sourness. And that reminded me of something that you said earlier about, or maybe Carmen said earlier about that, I forget who said, about how capitalism used to be sort of the magic thing that opened up the Berlin Wall and that, destroyed communism in Russia. And I kind of want to go back to I think those things are related in the sense that, um, we're kind of people are souring on the idea that capitalism is the magic thing, but we need to ask the question, okay, what was the magic thing? Like the Berlin Wall did fall, and there was the end of the Soviet Union. So if it wasn't capitalism, what was it, and can we do that? Right? I mean, so it feels to me like when we get in this sour sort of embittered, which I think is sort of a privileged stance, like, well, that was supposed to work to control the universe. That little strategy was supposed to work to control the universe, and it didn't work, and so now we're pissed. It's like we don't go back and learn the thing that actually was magic and that we can have joy about, which I think is sort of the opposite of souring or bitterness. And what was that? I mean, I don't think it was economic. I remember capitalism and democracy always being tied together in my civics classes and social science classes in high school and college. And and I kept wondering, like, well, but you can have, democratic socialism, like you can have one without the other. So why are these tied together? And it's because it was a religion. People believed that they were tied together. It was the religion of the time. And so I'm wondering, what can we learn from that now? Like, where can we go?
It's a good question.
It is a good question. Yeah, because people used to believe that sort of the freedom to, choose your leaders and exercise your kind of policy preferences through the system went hand in hand with a fairly freely operating market. And the truth is, capitalism does deserve a lot of the credit in some ways for the, the the prosperity in the West, and the ability to combine, personal freedom and economic freedom, that I think was very appealing. The problem is that, the neoliberal kind of version of it, and where we were after Bretton Woods collapsed, meant that the wealth wasn't shared as widely. When you had economic growth, um, it didn't lift
Trickle down.
all boats quite
Yeah.
as much. Personal incomes went up. But the other thing that started to happen after Bretton Woods is that you got more frequent recessions. Sometimes they were deeper and it took longer to recover from. So I think the loss of the sense of kind of, you could just foresee with a fair amount of certainty that incomes would rise, and it would be a fairly straight shot, that there, this combination of the wealth wasn't shared as widely, the economic, there was more economic uncertainty, there were things that just, and then the huge China shock. I mean, it's not that the whole dynamic of capitalism that you can that the markets can figure out, if you give them a chance, where to profitably invest money so that there is technological progress and economic growth. That kind of mechanism didn't fall apart, but other things didn't support it as well. I mean, so I don't, that doesn't exactly answer your question, Julie, about what was kind of the magic sauce that
Yeah, I
all
have
came
two things to
together.
say on that, as I've been listening to you.
Okay.
And it was a great question. One is, I think it wasn't like a positive thing. In other words, it wasn't how wonderful capitalism or democracy was that led to the fall of Berlin Wall. I think it was a demonstration that control does not work. You know, this idea of controlling people and controlling economies doesn't really work. And I'm just sneaking in my anarchism again. But
I heard you say the opposite. Yeah.
yeah, but I just think that
Yeah.
sorry. I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I've heard you say the opposite, that sometimes I've heard
Oh
you
yeah,
say,
no, well, you
sorry,
know,
the opposite. So that's,
yeah,
yeah,
I'm a flexible thinker.
we're both inconsistent all the time.
I'm a flexitarian.
Right.
Yes, I am. I admit it. But I think that was a real failure. And then when I think about capitalism, and as you know, I'm not an economist at all.
But
when
you
I
understand current accounts.
but when when I think about it, I think, you know, it was not so much capitalism as it was the state of human knowledge. And the state of human knowledge 200 years ago, in many respects, was poor. So we thought it was fine to throw noxious gas into the atmosphere. And we thought it was fine to throw away things that we didn't need anymore. And my thought experiment that I always have is, if we could go back in time and redesign or come up with or evolve into an economic system, knowing what we know now, we would have a totally different system, not totally, but a significantly different system. And it would be probably have its own faults, but at least we wouldn't have the old faults, right? And one of my thought
Wait a minute,
experiments.
would we? I mean, I kind of think maybe we would invent something exactly as disastrous as it
Well,
has been, so that we could very quickly see the problems and then correct them. I mean,
well,
in other ways, it's like fail early and then change.
well, you know, let me just get this in. One of my favorite thought experiments, and I know I've mentioned it to you, but I don't think I've mentioned it to Julia, is what if the Romans had discovered electricity? Because, you know, they had the water thing right. They understood water, and you can generate electricity just with water, and then you would be able to generate steam. I often think about how our economy and the world would have developed in a perhaps, well, it would have to have been different. I'm not sure how, in a different way, if the Romans had just gone, you know, around 200 AD. Hey, look at this. We can make things turn using water and steam. And oh my God, look at what we're going to be able to do. It's one of my favorite thought experiments. And if I was a fantasy writer, I would write that one up.
That's really interesting. I wonder if it would destroy itself and then come back in a gentler way, sort of swing through the pendulum,
Yeah.
and then we would be at a different place that way.
Or it couldn't, you know, just to be fair, it could have also been the Chinese.
Yeah.
Because they were as sophisticated, if not more sophisticated, than the Romans in all sorts of social organization ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, one thing when I think back to the triumphalism of that era is, you know, our policymakers, our elites were a little too self-confident in, you know, I mean, the way they pushed deregulation. Their theory was great. I mean, it made sense. It certainly made sense in the construct of, you know, capitalism, that if you just have freer capital flows and such, you know, you liberalize the financial markets, money flows the right places, and people prosperity increases, but that's not exactly what happened. It flowed to the financial sector, which
Exactly. And
grew
all the
outside.
bright people, not all, but so many of the bright people, all they wanted to do was make money
Right,
rather than make anything useful. They
Yes.
just wanted,
Right, and then that became the tech sector.
yeah,
yeah.
You know,
exactly.
and so if any sector that's not regulated, so what I feel like is not accounted for, in policy is I just feel like behavioral economists have got to get on it with a greed model, with an addiction model.
Oh,
Like, it
I
has to be
love that.
I-
By the way, I don't want to lose sight of that. I had never thought of greed as an addiction before, but it is, and it's probably
Yeah.
our worst addiction.
Right, and if it's not in the model, then your model's going to fail because it's in the human
Yes.
and it's in the
Right.
culture,
Right.
right? And so I don't know, but I also think that the self-confidence back in those days of the policymakers that you were talking about is a piece of why the Berlin Wall fell. It's like that brings hope, that brings a sense of charisma. I think it's all the human factors. I actually don't think
Right.
it's the economic system at all. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, true, it's a non sequitur, but I also know that we're conscious of time. True to her background as an economist, Ginny brought us a chart. And I it would be
Charts.
horrible if
Oh,
we didn't,
yes,
if we
yes.
didn't show the chart. Is it back here?
Yes.
I mean, she's got several charts,
Yes,
but
but this is let's go for the
it's
US.
this one, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is world
Here,
GDP.
I'll hold it so that people can see it better.
Wow, it's easy to see that chart.
And it's the starting point is 1900.
Yeah, and this one it's 1900, but the economists that worked on it did it back to like, I don't know, 1500, and it was just this little flat line, and then all of a sudden. So, I mean, the world is better off in some ways, but the other chart I would probably show you in conjunction with that is the CO2 emissions.
Here, this is fantastic.
There is an unfortunate sort of similarity there, although the scales are different.
Yeah,
If I had done them to the same scale, the
CO2
would be lower,
would not look quite as bad.
not look quite as
Now-
bad, but there's.
Well, and it's nice to see. It's like heartening to see that slope
Yeah.
change drop.
Yes,
on
it
the
is. That's
CO2.
the good news on this.
Yeah.
The one thing I would say to this chart is that it's often correlated or to like technology or the, industrial revolution or
yeah.
technology revolution. But this also correlates to women's involvement in society and economy. That from 1900 until today, right? There's been just a exponential change in the involvement of women in society and economy. And maybe that correlates as well. Well, it
Yes,
doesn't
and
correlate.
just wait until
Maybe
women-
that's causal as well.
Yes.
Yes, and just wait until women are paid for the caregiving work that they do.
Well, yeah,
Um,
exactly. That is something that
That'll change things too.
happened.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you wanted to say? We may have you back as a guest. It's a threat.
Yes, please.
Okay, well, no, this was fun. It was lovely sort of meeting you again remotely. And
Yeah.
so,
Well, good.
okay.
Do you have any economist jokes to end on?
Oh, geez. I did keep economist joke lists a while back, but I don't have any that I think are worthy of this.
This August,
Yes, gathering.
gathering,
Such as
exactly.
it is.
All right, I have one that I just made up.
Oh, okay, go
Okay.
ahead.
Okay, an economist walks into a bar and stays there.
Well, I would also when I was listening to you, Jenny, but we didn't get into this, but Jenny and I were like thinking partners at the agency. And I tend to be optimistic and non-statistical in my ways of thinking. And Ginny, I know, is definitely more statistical. You won't argue with that. You might argue with my characterization of you as a pessimist.
Yeah.
Yes.
On some things I am.
Yes.
But
It was really it was a very good dynamic between the two of us. And at least I thought
I thought so
yeah,
too.
exactly. So
Yeah, you seem realistic, Jenny.
yes. Well, there she is. And you know what Ginny's love language is?
What?
She makes you a spreadsheet.
Aw.
Whatever that issue is, if she's done a spreadsheet for you, she really loves you.
Wow. All right. This is a new goal. Thank you.
All right. Well, Ginny, thanks so much. I know that you're skeptical of all these endeavors,
Yes,
but
Thank you, Jenny. You're awesome.
it can be fun.
it can be fun.
And
Thank you.